The judgment of fear, the assembly hall stretched into darkness above, its crystalline walls carved by hands that had long turned to dust. Ambassador Chun Wei stood at the center of the circular chamber floor, surrounded by representatives from 49 species. Each occupied tiers that rose like waves frozen in stone, their forms ranging from the familiar to the incomprehensible. Chun Wei had prepared for this moment for months, yet standing here, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon her, she understood that no preparation could be enough. The human species has participated in this assembly for 200 standard cycles, began Magistrate Vorath. The Kelvin's forearms gestured in patterns that translated his words into light for those species that communicated visually. His voice carried naturally through the chamber, amplified by acoustics designed by architects whose names nobody remembered. 200 cycles that have brought unprecedented disruption to our carefully maintained order. Chun Wei kept her expression neutral, though her heart hammered against her ribs. Behind her stood Captain James Nakamura, commander of Earth's diplomatic security detail. His presence provided little comfort. Whatever happened here today would not be decided by force. We have broken no laws, Magistrate, Chun Wei replied. Her voice reached every corner without effort, just as Vorath's had. We have honored every treaty signed since our admission to this assembly. A ripple moved through the gathered representatives. Some made sounds that might have been laughter or might have been something else entirely. The Sylph delegation, beings of pure energy contained within crystalline shells, pulsed with colors, Chun Wei had learned to associate with amusement. Laws, said Council Member Thissa, a Marlian whose species had explored space for 8,000 years before humans discovered fire. You speak of laws as if they capture the entirety of our concern. Your species does not break laws. You break expectations. You shatter assumptions. You advance too quickly. Chun Wei felt Nakamura shift his weight behind her. She could sense his frustration, his desire to defend humanity's achievements. But this was not his battle to fight. Is rapid advancement a crime? Chun Wei asked. Should we apologize for learning? For adapting? For contributing to the collective knowledge of this assembly? Contribution, Vorath said, and his tone carried something that might have been sadness. Yes, you have contributed. In 200 cycles, your species has refined faster than light travel methods that we believed perfected over millennia. You have introduced social systems that challenge governments, which have stood for eons. You have brokered trade agreements that shifted economic power across 70 star systems. A holographic display materialized in the chamber center, showing the galaxy in miniature. The core glowed bright with civilization, countless systems marked in various colors representing the member species. Far out on one spiral arm, highlighted in red, was human-controlled space. You arrived as children, continued another voice. This one belonging to Representative Quilm, a being that resembled flowing water held in roughly humanoid shape. We welcomed you, taught you, integrated you into our society, and you consumed our knowledge like fire consumes dry wood. You took our technology and improved it. You took our culture and transformed it. You spread across 40 systems in the time. Most species spread across one. 73 systems, Chun Wei corrected quietly. We established colonies on 73 systems, all within territories designated for expansion by assembly law. The silence that followed was profound. 73? Magistrate Vorath's voice had lost its measured calm. Our last census showed 40. The last census was conducted 30 cycles ago, Chun Wei explained. Much has changed since then. Another ripple moved through the assembly, but this time it carried a different quality. Fear. Chun Wei could feel it, despite the vast differences between human emotion and whatever these beings experienced. They were afraid of what humanity had become. This is precisely why we have called this assembly, Vorath said. 200 cycles ago, you were confined to one world, dependent on our technology, our guidance. Now you rival species that have existed for 10,000 cycles. In another 1,000 cycles, where will you be? What will you become? We will become whatever we must, Chun Wei replied. Humanity survived ice ages and plagues and wars that nearly destroyed us. We learned to split the atom and touch the stars. We did not come to this assembly to remain stagnant. We came to grow. And that is the problem, Thesa said. Growth must be controlled. Progress must be measured. The stability we have maintained requires that advancement occur at a pace all species can match. Your species threatens that stability simply by existing. Chun Wei looked around at the assembled representatives. She saw it now in their alien faces, in their postures, in the way they positioned themselves. This decision had been made before she ever entered this chamber. The trial was a formality, a ritual to satisfy some sense of justice, or perhaps simply tradition. The vote has been taken, Magistrate Vorath announced. 41 species voted for exile. 8 voted against. Humanity is hereby removed from assembly space. The word struck Chun Wei like a physical blow. Exile. Not expulsion, not restriction. Exile. You will be relocated to the void sector, Vorath continued. The hologram shifted, zooming toward a dark region far from the galactic center, beyond the borders of explored space. This region exists outside mapped territory. It offers abundant resources and room for your species to grow at whatever pace you choose, without disturbing the balance we have carefully maintained. The void sector is unexplored, Nakamura said, speaking for the first time. His voice was hard, carrying barely controlled anger. You're sending 50 billion humans into unknown space. There could be hostile species, dangerous phenomena. You're condemning us to uncertainty. Asterisk, you are adaptable, Quillen said, and there was something cruel in the way its form rippled. You have proven this repeatedly. You will survive. Chun Wei's mind raced through possibilities, through arguments, through desperate diplomatic maneuvers. But she saw the futility. These beings had made their decision based on fear, and fear was not something diplomacy could easily overcome. How long do we have? She asked quietly. 15 standard cycles to evacuate all human presence from assembly space, Vorath replied. All colonies must be abandoned. All trade agreements are void. All diplomatic relations are severed. At the end of 15 cycles, a barrier will be erected around the void sector. It will be permanent. A prison, Nakamura said flatly. A reservation, Vorath corrected, for your protection and ours. Chun Wei looked up at the 49 representatives. Some met her gaze. Others looked away. She understood then that some of them felt guilt about this decision, but not enough to change it. Fear was stronger than guilt. This assembly has existed for 12,000 cycles, Chun Wei said, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to break through. It has survived wars, plagues, and cosmic disasters. But it will not survive fear. You exile us today because you're afraid of what we might become. That fear will not end with us. There will be others who advance too quickly, who adapt too well, who threaten your comfortable stagnation. And you will exile them too, one by one, until you're alone in your precious stability. She turned and walked toward the exit. Nakamura followed, his footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. Behind them, the assembly remained silent. The next 15 cycles passed in a blur of desperate activity. Earth's government, now a representative. Democracy spanning dozens of worlds, mobilized every resource. 50 billion people needed to be moved. Colonies that humans had spent generations building had to be abandoned. The massive arc ships had to be constructed, vessels large enough to carry millions in suspended animation. Chun Wei watched the exodus unfold from Earth. She had returned to humanity's homeworld, the planet where everything began, to coordinate the final departure. From her office in Geneva, she could see the construction yards in orbit. Hundreds of arc ships taking shape, each one a city unto itself, each one carrying a piece of humanity's future into the unknown. Some people accepted exile with anger, eager to prove the assembly wrong. Others went reluctantly, leaving homes their families had known for generations. There were protests, there was grief, but there was also determination. Humanity had faced extinction before and survived. They would survive this too. Captain Nakamura oversaw the military evacuation. Every weapon, every ship, every piece of defensive technology had to be moved. The assembly watched with their monitoring vessels, ensuring the exodus stayed on schedule. They were not cruel about it, but they were inflexible. When one colony requested additional time to harvest their crops, the assembly refused. Rules were rules, asterisk. Chun Wei spent her days managing logistics and her nights staring at star maps of the void sector. It was vast, larger than current human space by an order of magnitude. Survey probes had revealed thousands of star systems, many with planets that might support life. But there was something else too, something the probes couldn't quite explain. Anomalous readings that suggested artificial structures, ruins perhaps, scattered throughout the sector. Whoever lived there before is long gone, Nakamura said one evening as they reviewed the data together. If anyone lived there at all. Something built those structures, Chun Wei replied. Something with technology we don't recognize. Another extinct civilization, Nakamura suggested. The galaxy is full of their remnants. Chun Wei wasn't so sure, but she kept her doubts to herself. They had enough challenges without adding speculation about ancient aliens to the mix. The final day arrived. The last human vessel, the flagship Unity carrying Shen Wei, Nakamura, and the remnants of Earth's government, prepared to pass through the barrier. The assembly had completed their work, a massive wall of energy that surrounded the void sector like a shimmering curtain in space. On Unity's bridge, Chun Wei watched their destination approach. Behind them, assembling monitoring vessels maintained their distance, present to witness humanity's final departure from known space. Around Unity, 2,300 arc ships formed a convoy stretching across millions of kilometers. 50 billion people in various states of suspended animation, carrying everything humanity had built, heading into darkness. All ships report ready, Nakamura announced from his station. 2,300 vessels, all systems green. We're ready to proceed. Chun Wei took a deep breath. This was it. The moment that would define humanity's future. They could be heading toward salvation or destruction, toward opportunity or oblivion. There was no way to know until they crossed that barrier. Then let's go, she said simply. Unity moved forward. The barrier approached, filling every screen with blue-white light. Chun Wei felt a strange sensation as they passed through, as if the universe held its breath. Sound disappeared. The hum of engines, the beep of instruments, even her own heartbeats seemed to fade into silence. Then they were through. The barrier solidified behind them, cutting them off from everything they had known. Chun Wei turned to look at the rear displays, watching as the galaxy that had been humanity's home disappeared behind an impenetrable wall of energy. We're receiving a final transmission from the assembly, reported the communications officer. Play it. Chun Wei ordered. Magistrate Voreth's face appeared on the screen. He looked older somehow, more tired than he had at the trial. Ambassador Chun Wei, he began. I want you to understand that I take no pleasure in this exile. But it is necessary. Your species is young and has much to learn about the importance of stability, of measured progress, of respecting the wisdom of age. Perhaps in 10,000 cycles you will understand. Until then, may you find what you need in the void sector. This is our final communication. The screen went dark. Should we respond? The communications officer asked. Chun Wei considered it. She thought about everything she wanted to say, about injustice and fear and wasted potential. But in the end, she simply shook her head. No, she said. We'll respond with what we build out here. That will be answer enough. Nakamura stood and looked at the forward displays. They showed the void sector stretching before them, millions of stars in the darkness, unexplored and unmapped. Dangerous, certainly, but also full of possibility. All ships, he transmitted on the fleet-wide channel. This is Captain Nakamura. We have passed through the barrier. We are now beyond assembly space. We are alone. He paused, then continued. And we are free. Set course for the nearest star cluster. Let's find a home. The fleet moved forward, engines burning bright against the dark. 2,300 ships carrying humanity's future. Behind them, the barrier glowed, separating them from everything they had known. Chun Wei remained on the bridge, watching the stars. Somewhere in this darkness was their future. They would build, they would grow, and someday they would prove the assembly wrong. She just hoped they would survive long enough to do it. The first anomaly appeared within hours. Sensors detected something ahead, something vast and artificial, orbiting a dead star. As Unity approached, the structure resolved on the screens. It was enormous, a sphere 10 kilometers across, its surface covered in patterns that seemed to shift and change as they watched. What is that? Nakamura asked, his voice filled with wonder. The science officer studied her instruments, her eyes widening. It's technology, she reported. Ancient technology. Nothing like what the assembly uses. These readings suggest it's millions of years old. Chun Wei leaned forward, studying the structure. It looked dead, inactive, but there was something about it that suggested otherwise. Something that hinted at purpose, at design, at intelligence that had reached far beyond anything humanity or the assembly had achieved. Change of plans, she said, a smile slowly forming. Set course for that structure. Let's see what secrets the void sector is hiding. As Unity turned toward the ancient ruin, Chun Wei felt something she hadn't felt since the exile began. Hope. The assembly had thrown humanity into the darkness, expecting them to struggle and fail. But they had also thrown humanity into a region filled with the remnants of a civilization that might have been far more advanced than anything in explored space. And if there was one thing humanity excelled at, it was learning from those who came before. The void sector waited, and humanity was ready to explore. Architects of eternity. The structure was dead, but not empty. That was the conclusion Dr. Maya Osei reached after 3 months of study. She floated in zero gravity inside the sphere's outer chamber, her suit lights cutting through darkness that had lasted for millions of years. Around her, walls stretched in impossible geometries, covered in symbols that hurt to look at for too long. Maya was 52 years old, born on Mars, and had spent her entire career studying Zen archaeology. She had examined ruins left by a dozen extinct species across assembly space. Nothing had prepared her for this. The structure responds to conscious thought, she reported to the research team waiting outside. Her voice crackled through the communication link. It's not mechanical. It's something else entirely. Biological technological hybrid, maybe, or something our language doesn't have words for. Can we learn from it? Asked Dr. James Park, who coordinated the research effort from Unity. Maya touched one of the walls. The symbols shifted under her gloved hand, rearranging themselves into new patterns. We already are. I've extracted data storage units from the inner chambers. Hundreds of them. Each one contains more information than our entire pre-exile database. She carefully removed a crystalline object from a recessed alcove. It glowed faintly, pulsing with internal light. The crystal felt warm even through her gloves, as if alive. Back on Unity, Maya placed the crystal in the analysis chamber. The moment it connected to their computer systems, information flooded the screens. Mathematics that danced at the edge of comprehension. Physics that suggested reality operated on principles humanity had never imagined. And something else, something that looked like instructions. "They're teaching us," Maya whispered, staring at the cascading data. Whoever built this left behind lessons. Lessons on how to manipulate fundamental forces. How to bend space. How to touch time itself. Captain Nakamura stood beside her, watching the screens with growing unease. Time manipulation? Is that even possible? According to this, it is. Maya pulled up a section of the translated data. The precursors, that's what I'm calling them, didn't just study time. They learned how to anchor objects in temporal space. How to make something exist across multiple time periods simultaneously. Ambassador Chen Wei joined them in the research lab. She had aged visibly over the past 3 months, the weight of responsibility for 50 billion lives showing in new lines on her face. But her eyes remained sharp. Could we do that? She asked. Could we anchor ourselves in time? Maya hesitated. Maybe, eventually, but we barely understand a fraction of what we're seeing here. This technology is millions of years beyond us. It would take decades, maybe centuries, to fully comprehend it. Then we start now, Shen Wei said simply. That became the pattern. Humanity spread across the void sector, discovering precursor structures everywhere they looked. Some were small, barely larger than a house. Others were planetary in scale, artificial moons that had once orbited stars, but now drifted alone in space. Each one contained knowledge. Each one taught humanity something new. 50 years passed. The refugees became colonists, became pioneers. New Hope, humanity's first colony in the void sector, grew from a temporary settlement into a thriving city of 5 million. Around it, 88 other worlds bloomed with human life. The colonies were nothing like the comfortable worlds humanity had left behind. Resources were scarce. Most planets required environmental suits for surface work. But humans adapted. They always had. Dr. James Park led the terraforming initiative. He was born in space, part of the first generation to grow up in the void sector, and he had no patience for slow and careful. His team developed techniques that would have horrified the assembly. They used nuclear charges to jumpstart volcanic activity. They crashed ice-laden asteroids into dry worlds to create oceans. They seeded atmospheres with engineered bacteria that could survive in conditions that would kill natural life. "We're playing God," one of his assistants said nervously, watching as they prepared to crack open a planet's mantle. "No," James corrected. "Gods create from nothing. We're just determined gardeners." It worked 70% of the time. The other 30% taught valuable lessons about what not to do. Within 100 years, humanity had established permanent settlements on 89 worlds. None were as comfortable as Earth had been, but they were homes. The Ark ships never landed. They were too valuable, too expensive to rebuild. Instead, they became mobile cities and research stations. Unity itself orbited New Hope, housing 10 million people, and serving as the capital of what people started calling the human dominion. The name emerged naturally. No one declared it officially. People just started using it, and it felt right. They were no longer refugees. They were builders of something new. Maya Asay made her breakthrough in year 143. She had spent her entire adult life studying precursor technology, kept alive by medical advances humanity had developed in isolation. The assembly had restricted many medical technologies as too dangerous. Without those restrictions, human lifespans had quietly doubled. Maya was now 120 years old, and she had finally decoded a complete precursor. Data crystal. The information flooded into her consciousness, because that was the only way to interface with precursor technology, through direct neural connection. What she saw changed everything. The precursors hadn't died. They hadn't been destroyed by war or plague or cosmic disaster. They had transcended. They had learned how to separate consciousness from physical form, how to exist as pure information spread across time and space. And they had done it because they knew the universe was going to end. Maya brought her findings to the Dominion Council. Chun Wei was still there, now over 150 years old, kept alive by medical technology, and what Maya suspected was sheer stubbornness. The heat death of the universe, Maya explained to the assembled leaders. Trillions of years in the future. But the precursors could see it coming. They couldn't stop it. No one can. But they could survive beyond it by becoming something that doesn't need physical existence. Why didn't they tell anyone? Asked Admiral David Chun, Captain Nakamura's grandson, who now commanded the Dominion fleet. Why not share this knowledge? I think they tried, Maya said. But species that exist in normal time can't comprehend what they became. It's like trying to explain color to someone who only sees in black and white. The experience doesn't translate. Chun Wei leaned forward. So they left instructions. These structures, these crystals, they're a roadmap for whoever comes next. Yes, Maya confirmed. And we're the first species to get this far. The assembly moves too slowly, too cautiously. They would spend 10,000 years debating whether to study this technology. But we don't have their luxury. We're desperate, isolated, and that makes us willing to try things they never would. The Dominion Council debated for months. The question was fundamental. Should humanity try to follow the precursor's path? Should they attempt to transcend physical existence? The debate split humanity. Some saw it as the ultimate goal, ensuring survival beyond any possible disaster. Others saw it as abandoning their humanity, losing what made them who they were. Chun Wei broke the deadlock with a simple question. Why not both? The Quantum Consciousness Project began in year 160. Dr. Sarah Lee, a brilliant neurologist born on New Hope, led the initiative. Her goal wasn't to abandon physical existence, but to expand it. We copy consciousness, she explained. Create quantum duplicates that can exist in computer systems while the original remains in a biological body. When the body dies, the consciousness continues. Memories, personality, everything that makes someone themselves. Preserved forever. The first volunteer was Admiral David Chun. He was 80 years old, still sharp, but approaching the end of his natural life. If the process failed, he would die. If it succeeded, he would become the first human to exist beyond death. It succeeded. A copy of David Chun that emerged in the quantum network was identical to the original. Same memories, same personality, same voice. He could see through sensors, speak through speakers, control machines with thought. When the original David Chun died 5 years later, peacefully in his sleep, his quantum self remained. I'm still me, the quantum David Chun reported. I remember dying. I remember being in the body when it stopped. But I also remember waking up here, in this system. I exist in both places. I am both Davids, and I'm somehow more than either. Within 50 years, quantum consciousness became standard. When someone died, their consciousness could continue if they chose. Not everyone made that choice. Some preferred to end naturally with their bodies. But enough did that a new layer of human civilization emerged. The quantum citizens, they were called. Minds without bodies, living in the networks, guiding the ships, running the cities. They were still human. They still laughed, argued, created art, told stories. They just did it without needing to breathe. Maya Osei never underwent the process. She remained physical until the end, studying the precursors with a body grown old. On her deathbed at age 208, she made one final discovery. "I know what we need to do," she told Chun Wei, who somehow still refused to die. The precursors didn't just transcend. They anchored themselves. They made it so they existed across all time simultaneously. Past, present, future. They became permanent. Can we do that? Chun Wei asked. Not yet, Maya admitted, her voice weak. But my notes are complete. Give it another 100 years, maybe 2. Someone will figure it out. She died that night. Her consciousness had been copied, but the original Maya Osei was gone. The quantum Maya continued her work, but she always said it wasn't quite the same. Something was lost in the translation, some spark that made the original unique. The breakthrough came in year 243. Dr. Elena Vasquez Chun, great-granddaughter of both Chun Wei and Captain Nakamura, was a quantum consciousness who had never had a biological body. She had been born directly into the network, created from merged genetic patterns of her ancestors. She looked at Maya's notes with fresh perspective, with eyes that had never known physical limitation, and she saw what biological humans had missed. "We've been thinking about this wrong," she announced. "We don't need to transcend. We need to persist." The precursors made themselves exist across all time by creating structures that anchor consciousness to specific points in space-time. Structures that, once created, have always existed and will always exist. The Dominion Council struggled to understand. "Think of it like this," Elena explained. "Imagine you write a book. Once it's written, that book exists in time from the moment of its creation forward. Now imagine you write a book that, when finished, retroactively places copies of itself throughout all of history. Every library that ever existed suddenly has a copy, because from the universe's perspective, the book has always been there." "That's paradox," someone objected. "No," Elena said. "That's the precursor's gift. They learned how to create things that stabilize their own past existence. Temporal anchors, objects that once activated, become permanent fixtures of reality itself. They called them eternity nodes. The first prototype was small, barely the size of a human fist. It contained a simple message: humanity was here. When activated, it did nothing visible. But every sensor in the system screamed that something had changed. It's spreading backward in time," Elena reported, reading the data with shock. "The node's temporal signature is appearing in our historical records. Yesterday's sensor logs now show it was here. Last month's surveys detect it. It's writing itself into history. Asterisk, how far back?" Someone asked. "I don't know. Maybe forever. Maybe just to the moment it was created. Time becomes flexible around these things." They tested it extensively. They sent probes to systems they had surveyed 200 years earlier. Every single probe found an eternity node floating in space, weathered and ancient, as if it had been there all along. "This is it," Elena declared. "This is how the precursors survived. They created billions of these nodes, containing their knowledge, their consciousness, their entire civilization. Nodes that exist everywhere and everyone. You can't destroy what has always existed and will always exist." The Dominion Council saw the implications immediately. Asterisk. "If we do this," said Admiral James Chun, another descendant of the original captain, "if we build enough of these nodes and fill them with human knowledge and consciousness, we become permanent. The assembly could destroy every human body, every ship, every world. But they couldn't erase us from existence. We would remain in the nodes, in history, in time itself." "It sounds like becoming gods," someone said nervously. "It sounds like survival," Chun Wei countered. She was incredibly over 300 years old now, kept alive by technology and will. The assembly exiled us because they feared what we might become. Let's show them. Let's become something that time itself cannot erase. The vote was unanimous. Construction began on the chronosphere, a network of billions of eternity nodes that would span the entire human dominion. Each node would contain complete knowledge and history of humanity. Each would host quantum consciousnesses. Each would be a library, a beacon, and a seed for future growth. It took centuries to complete. But humanity had learned patience in the void sector. They had learned that true strength wasn't in weapons or fleets. It was in persistence, in refusing to be erased from existence. Construction ships spread across 400 star systems, placing nodes on every world, every station, every significant location. Billions upon billions of nodes, each one anchoring itself not just to the present, but to all time. The activation was scheduled for a year, 500 since exile. On the anniversary of humanity passing through the barrier, Dr. Marcus Lowell, a hybrid consciousness who existed as both quantum and biological, coordinated the massive undertaking. "We're ready," he reported to the Dominion Council. "All nodes synchronized. The chronosphere is complete." Chun Wei, impossibly still alive at over 400 years old, gave the order. Activate. 400 star systems, billions of nodes, all activating simultaneously. The energy required was enormous. Every fusion reactor in the Dominion ran at maximum capacity. Every solar collector focused its output. For 3.7 seconds, humanity used more energy than a small star. And then the chronosphere came online. Marcus watched from multiple temporal perspectives at once. His consciousness split between biological sight and quantum perception. He saw the nodes light up like stars. He saw their temporal anchors spread backward through time, carving permanent channels in space-time itself. He saw history rewrite. The past didn't change. Earth still existed. The exile still happened. But now, woven through all of it were the eternity nodes. Survey crews from 200 years ago had found them. Explorers from 500 years ago had detected their signals. Archaeologists digging on Earth found nodes buried in ancient strata, looking billions of years old, but containing distinctly human technology. It was paradox. It was impossible. It was real. "The chronosphere is stable," reported Elena Vasquez-Chun. "We are anchored. I can feel it across all timelines. We exist in all time simultaneously. We are permanent." A cheer erupted across the Dominion, from crowds on every human world, from consciousnesses throughout the quantum network. Humanity had done it. They had made themselves impossible to erase from existence. 3 days later, they found an eternity node on Earth itself. The Earth they had left behind, on the other side of the barrier. The node was buried under what had been London, placed there according to temporal dating before humans had even evolved. "It's been there for 3 million years, the researcher reported in confusion. "But it contains our data, current data, information about the chronosphere activation." "How is that possible?" "Because time isn't linear anymore," Marcus explained. "Not for the nodes. They exist in superposition across all time periods. When we activated the chronosphere, we seeded nodes throughout history, including on Earth, including before humanity existed. The implications took years to fully understand. The chronosphere didn't just make humanity hard to kill. It made human knowledge, culture, and consciousness accessible across time itself. They had become something the precursors had been, beings that existed beyond normal temporal flow, and then they discovered the precursors' final message, encoded in the deepest layers of their oldest structure. Beware the silence at the end of time. Beware the final moment. Prepare, build, survive. And when the universe ends, remember us. The heat death. The precursors had seen it coming and had built their temporal network to survive it. Now humanity would have to do the same. But that was a problem for the future. For now, humanity had achieved something remarkable. They had made themselves permanent. Chun Wei died peacefully in her sleep at age 412. Her quantum copy continued, but the original was finally gone. She had lived long enough to see humanity transform from refugees into something beyond what the Assembly had feared. Year 800 since exile. Assembly probes found a weak point in the barrier. They discovered what humanity had become. Beings anchored in time itself, spreading across 400 star systems, impossible to erase without creating paradoxes that would unmake reality. The Assembly watched in horror and wonder. The species they had exiled out of fear had become something they couldn't comprehend. Something permanent. Something eternal. Humanity had responded to exile, not with weapons or war, but with patience and persistence. They had built an empire that time itself couldn't erase. And deep in the quantum networks, Helena Vasquez Chan smiled. The real work was only just beginning. Asterisk.